Hello, my sweet book besties. Welcome back to my vlog channel. It's your girl, HALEYJEAN, and today I am here with a book rec video. I feel like it is the season of the reading slump, and a lot of you bitches are suffering, and I'm here with the cure. Today we are going to be talking about 8 books that can get you out of a reading slump. These are my personal recommendations, tried and true, did it myself. We've got recommendations from a variety of genres, and that is how I'm going to kind of organize this video. So I will have timestamps in the description box for each genre that we talk about. We have lit fic, romance, thriller, and nonfiction. So I am realizing that I don't have any fantasy recs on this list, but I think that's because I usually don't use fantasy to get out of a reading slump. Most of my fantasy recs are like long series where you get invested in a character, and I feel like that is not really what I'm looking for when I'm in a reading slump. However, I'm always in the mood for a good standalone fantasy rec. So if you got any fantasy or fantasy romance standalones that you think I should check out, let me know in the comments below. But for today, we're not going to be talking about fantasy because I'm going to be bringing you standalone books that are short, sweet, fast-paced, and easy to get through. Usually compulsive reads that you just can't and don't want to put down. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. But don't forget to follow me on my Instagram. I also have an ASMR channel if you're into bookish ASMR. All of my socials are linked in the description box. And without further ado, here are 8 books to get you out of a reading slump. The first section that I want to talk about is my literary fiction recommendations. And it's only right to start off with Play It As It Lays by Joan Didion, because this is the book that got me out of a really bad slump about 2 years ago. I picked it up one night and I read it in one sitting. A ruthless dissection of American life in the late 1960s, Joan Didion's Play It As It Lays captures the mood of an entire generation, plumbing the emptiness and ennui of a seemingly bankrupt society in spare sentences that scour and disturb. Set in the moral limbos of Hollywood, Las Vegas, and the Mojave Desert, Play It As It Lays remains, more than 40 years after its original publication, a profoundly unsettling novel, riveting in its exploration of a woman and a society in crisis, stunning in the still startling intensity of its prose. You might be shocked, gagged, galled that I would put a classic novel on this recommendation list, but this book is so easy and compulsive to read. This book follows an actress named Mariah as she marries a very famous Hollywood producer, director, who kind of takes advantage of their romance. And I feel like Mariah is kind of nihilism personified. I was both taken aback, but also extremely touched by her experiences in this novel, and I loved being in her perspective. Also, one of my favorite book covers of all time. I love it. If you have somehow not picked this up yet, highly recommend, especially if you're in a slump. My next lit fic rec is a little bit of a romance, and it was a rec from one of my bookish besties, Fleur. It is Open Water by Caleb Azumah Nelson, another really short and compulsive read. I annotated the shit out of this book because the prose is just so beautiful. Caleb Azumah Nelson's prose is so vast and just kind of envelops you, and it's like you want to dive in. Oh, I'm about to dive in. In a crowded London pub, 2 young people meet. Both are Black, British, and both won scholarships to private schools where they struggle to belong. Both are now artists. He's a photographer, she's a dancer, and both are trying to make their mark in a world that by turn celebrates and rejects them. Tentatively, tenderly, they fall in love. But 2 people who seem destined to be together can still be torn apart by fear and violence, and over the course of a year, they find their relationship tested by forces beyond their control. This book is told in second-person perspective, and it's one of the only full-length novels that I've read in that perspective. And at first, I thought it was going to be a little bit challenging or difficult, but after a few chapters, when you get going and you're into it, I loved it. It made the story feel so intimate while touching on some really vast and heavy topics. But at the core of this story, there is a romance between 2 Black people and Black art and Black music, and it's just a fantastic fucking book. So obviously has to go on this list, and the fact that it's less than 200 pages definitely doesn't hurt. So, okay, moving into our second category, these are my romance recommendations, my tried and trues. These are books that I gobbled up, if you will, literally and metaphorically. First is probably not a surprise to anybody, we have Heartless by Elsie Silver. Now, if you know me, you know I'm pretty much Elsie Silver's #1 fangirl, and I have been shoving down her books to anyone that I can for the past year and a half. But in case someone stumbles upon this video and they have not picked up Heartless, I would like to bless them. So here you go. This is a small town Canadian cowboy romance, and trust me, I am not the type of person who find myself craving a cowboy romance, but even if you think it's not your thing, let me keep going. It's an age gap, single dad, nanny romance, and our main characters, Cade and Willa, they are everything. It's Grumpy Sunshine, but instead of Willa being sunshine, she's more like a blazing hot firecracker. Cade Eaton is 13 years older than Willa Grant, and he barely looks her way, even though she's living in his house for the summer. That is until she gets him into the hot tub one night for a game of truth or dare. Then all bets are off. Cade is gruff and a little rough around the edges, but his broad shoulders and calloused hands and filthy mouth are this city girl's kryptonite. So, who is she to resist? But it's in their quietest moments together that he softens. It's in the unexpected way that he takes care of Willa that she realizes his hardened exterior is just a facade. And it's when she watches him go all sweet with his little boy that she starts to fall for him, whatever the consequences. They really do put the hot in hot tub scene. And if you love this, there's a whole entire other series of interconnected standalones that you can check out after. Now, if cowboys aren't your thing, what about big blue aliens that are 8 feet tall? I need to talk about Ice Planet Barbarians by Ruby Dixon. This is definitely not going to be for everyone, and I didn't think it would be for me, but I was so pleasantly surprised by the heart of this story. You'd think being abducted by aliens would be the worst thing that could happen to me. You'd be wrong, because now the aliens are having ship trouble, and they've left their cargo of human women, including me, on an ice planet. We're not equipped for life in this desolate winter wasteland. Since I'm the unofficial leader, I head out to the snow to look for help. I find help all right. A big blue horned alien introduces himself in a rather startling way. Vectel says that I'm his mate, his chosen female, and that my presence is the reason his chest is purring. He'll help me and my people survive, but this poses a new problem. If Vectel helps us survive, I'm not sure he's going to want to let me go. If I got stranded on an ice planet, I would immediately beg and pray for a Vectel to come and save me. I will say the first 5 chapters of this book are extremely dark and can be very triggering, so proceed with caution. But after that, it becomes the sweetest, fluffiest, spicy little romance. And I was surprised at how much I was giggling and kicking my feet. I loved that Georgie and Vectel have a bit of a language barrier that they have to overcome in this book, and the way that they do it was so adorable. It's short, it's quick, and the chapters are really, really fast paced. So you'll definitely be able to fly through this, I promise. Okay, those are my 2 romance recs. Now let's move on to nonfiction. The first book is a book that I've definitely talked about on this channel before, but I have not mentioned in a long, long time, and it's about damn time to talk about it again. This is A Sucky Love Story by Brittany Louise Taylor. Now, if any of you also grew up on the early days of YouTube, I'm talking 2008, 2007, you might recognize Brittany. She made some of the most iconic cover videos and parody songs back in the day, collaborated a lot with, trigger warning, Shane Dawson. But this is her book that she came out with, I think in 2018 or 2019. And at the time, I was not big into reading. I was a college student. I was busy in my studies. I was maybe reading 1 book a year for enjoyment. But I had been following Brittany's YouTube channel and her vlogs, and I had seen this story kind of happening from the outside, and she kept saying she could not talk about any of it until her book came out. So I had this pre-ordered, and the day it showed up at my house, I sat down instead of doing my college coursework, and I read this in less than 24 hours. I could not put it down. Where does a moderately popular internet star who never leaves her house look for potential suitors? Online. Tinder, Bumble, Match.com. I tried them all. My 31-year-old self clicked and swiped her little heart out. Maybe you can relate. Maybe you know all too well what the perils of modern dating are. But let's say eventually you meet someone. You think to yourself, wow, they're perfect. Take me off the market, put a ring on it, knock me up the whole enchilada. Let's also say that they feel the same way about you. Your life starts to make sense. All the pain, heartbreak, and frustration from past failed relationships was worth it. That's how I felt about Milos. He was from Europe, a doctor, wealthy, athletic. He had an accent and a dog. Milos was textbook marriage material. For him, it was love at first sight. For me, it was anxiety on every date. Something was telling me to run, but for 2 years, the only running I did was straight into his arms. If only I would have listened. This is not a love story. It's my story of survival. So much goes on. It is a wild ride. And I remember seeing Brittany posting vlogs announcing that she was engaged, that she was pregnant to this random European man. And it seemed like a perfect fairy tale from the outside. And I never, ever, 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 ever would have expected what happens in this book. From start to finish, kept me on the edge of my seat, will definitely get you out of a reading slump. My next rec is about another courageous, iconic woman sharing her story. We have Down the Drain by Julia Fox. I will recommend this book to you any chance I get, especially if you're in a reading slump. Pick up the audiobook. Julia narrates it herself, and I promise you, you will probably have your jaw on the floor for the entire time.
Did I seriously just wait 16 hours to get slapped in the face in front of the dead Pope? I didn't even get to have a moment with him. I walk them out and then get on my hands and knees and scour the carpet for cocaine residue, mistakenly rubbing cigarette ashes on my gums. I come to in an ambulance with vomit all around me. Even the paramedics are covered in vomit. On a routine visit to the probation office, I scan my hand and get an unexpected notification that I've been randomly selected for a drug test. Luckily, my dad gave me his pee, which I had warmed up in the microwave before biking over, so I'm not worried. I ordered 200 hissing cockroaches from Madagascar and convinced my old friend Serena to release them in the club in exchange for $100.
If that doesn't hook you, I don't know what will. Right when I finished this, I even recommended it to my brother, who is not a reader, and he also gobbled it up within like a couple days. Sometimes you have to say fuck it and throw your life down the drain just to see where you'll come out on the other side. The most profound beauty emerges from the ashes of destruction. And by that, I mean sometimes you have to burn your life to the ground in order to experience the life that is truly meant for you. If you think Julia's TikToks are interesting, try her book. It is 10 times more revealing than you could ever imagine. Okay, my friends, that brings us to the final category, which is going to be my thriller recommendations. I feel like thrillers are the quintessential get out of a slump genre. They are usually fast-paced, gripping, and enticing enough to keep reading. Let's start with my favorite YA thriller writer, Miss Holly Jackson. I do not get to talk about my love for Holly Jackson books enough, but today I want to recommend to you the Good Girl's Guide to Murder series. I have the second book here, Good Girl, Bad Blood. I actually loaned the first book to my younger sibling, so I don't have it. That shows you how much I love it. I'm lending it out. I want everyone to read it. I really appreciate the way that Holly Jackson toes the line between a young adult and an adult thriller. Like, she really dives into some pretty deep and heavy topics, but keeps the content very relatable for your average teenager. But I read this trilogy for the first time when I was 23 and I enjoyed it immensely. So I think anyone of any age can get into it. It follows a young girl named Pip who starts a DIY investigation about a murder that happened in her town. And then it just goes on from there as she begins to try and solve other crimes in her town, and as she ends up getting involved in some crimes herself. Compulsive, fast-paced. I actually read the first book in a 24-hour readathon, and it was so easy to fly through. I think I read it in like 5 hours. Love this trilogy. I don't get to talk about it enough. Had to include it in this video. My last and final rec, another iconic thriller, a shorty but a goodie. This is Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn. If Gillian Flynn has 100 fans, I am one of them. If Gillian Flynn has 1 fan, it is me. If Gillian Flynn has 0 fans, I am dead in the ground. This is another book that I read during my college studies that I really didn't think I would get invested in, but gripped me so quickly, and I had to know what happens, and I never, ever, ever would have saw the twist coming. Fresh from a brief stay at a psych hospital, reporter Camille Preaker faces a troubling assignment. She must return to her tiny hometown to cover the murders of 2 preteen girls. For years, Camille has hardly spoken to her neurotic, hypochondriac mother, or to the half-sister she barely knows, a beautiful 13-year-old girl with an eerie grip on the town. Now, installed in her old bedroom in her family's Victorian mansion, Camille finds herself identifying with the young victims, a bit too strongly. Dogged by her own demons, she must unravel the psychological puzzle of her own past if she wants to get to the story and survive this homecoming. Gillian Flynn is the queen of an iconic setting, and this book is set in a very, very small southern racist town where most of the people are either rich because they own the pig meat plant, or they're poor and they work slaughtering pigs all day at the factory. So you can only imagine kind of the underbelly of anger, fear, and turmoil going on in this town. And then you add a bunch of preteen girls going missing, and you need to know what happens and how Camille is connected to it all. And there's also a really, really good TV adaptation as well. Amy Adams is fucking fantastic in it. All right, those are my 8 recommendations to get you out of a reading slump. Hopefully you can add 1 or more of these to your TBR, and hopefully they do the trick. If you have any other books that you think are a surefire way to get out of a slump that I did not mention in this video, feel free to leave them in the comments below, or you can comment a tooth emoji. If you've read Sharp Objects, you know what I'm talking about. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. I'm sending you lots of love and light, and hopefully I'll see you in my next one. Bye.